There will be no military participation. We have a situation which we did not provoke, which we don't cause at all.
If we are to send our servicemen and women into harm's way, the very least they deserve is to know that they do so on a legal basis and with a proper thought through.
There has been no formal ask of Canada. We have no intention of getting involved offensively in the prosecution of the war in the region.
Some are countries that we've helped for many, many years. We've protected them from horrible outside sources, and they weren't that enthusiastic. And the level of enthusiasm matters to me. We don't need anybody. We don't need them. So I think NATO's making a very foolish mistake. And I've long said that, I wonder whether or not NATO would ever be there for us. So this was a great test.
Trump put NATO to the test this week. He demanded warships. He demanded minesweepers. He demanded troops. He said the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow waterway that carries 20% of the world's oil, needed to be secured, and that America's allies should stand up and help. Not one major NATO ally stepped forward. Trump called it a very foolish mistake. Then he said the United States did not need them anyway. And here is the part the American news channels buried in paragraph 14. While Trump was publicly fuming at allies who refused his orders, Canada was already sitting at a different table entirely, with the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, and Japan, signing a joint statement that committed to securing that same strait on their own terms, through international law, under the United Nations Security Council resolution, without a single mention of Washington's command. Canada did not follow Trump into this crisis. Canada did not refuse Trump either. Canada built its own coalition and moved first. There is a word for that. It is called statecraft. And the last time a Canadian Prime Minister exercised it at this level on an energy crisis, it was 1973. When Pierre Trudeau watched the Arab oil embargo strangle Western economies and responded by accelerating Petro-Canada's founding 2 years later, so Canada would never again be at the mercy of someone else's energy decisions. 53 years later, Canada is not at the mercy of anyone. Canada has the world's third largest proven oil reserves. Canada just shipped its first LNG cargo to the Pacific. And right now, every nation on Earth is scrambling for exactly what Canada has. Here is the verified picture of what is happening. The Strait of Hormuz, the narrow passage between Iran and Oman, carries approximately 20% of the world's daily oil supply. 20 million barrels per day pass through it in 2025, according to the IEA, the International Energy Agency, the Paris-based global energy watchdog. Iran has effectively closed it. Iranian forces have attacked unarmed commercial vessels, struck oil and gas installations, laid mines, and used drone and missile attacks to halt commercial shipping. Tankers are sitting outside the strait, refusing to enter. The world responded with the largest strategic petroleum reserve release in history. 32 IEA member countries agreed to release 400 million barrels of oil from emergency stockpiles to stabilize markets. Canada committed 23.6 million barrels of its own reserves as part of that coordinated effort. That is Canada contributing to a global solution, not waiting for American permission. But here is what the 400 million barrel release could not fix. Bloomberg New Energy Finance calculated that 400 million barrels covers approximately 4 days of global demand. 4 days. The market understood this immediately. Oil prices did not go down. The release was a signal, not a solution. The actual solution requires the strait to reopen, and that requires either Iran to stand down or allies to act. Trump wanted to act through NATO. NATO said no. Canada chose a third path. The joint statement Canada signed on March 19, 2026, alongside the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, and Japan, is not a NATO operation. It is a coalition of sovereign nations acting under international law, specifically under UN Security Council Resolution 2817, calling on Iran to cease attacks immediately and expressing readiness to contribute to ensuring safe passage. No American command, no NATO chain of command, 7 sovereign nations. One statement, Canada's name on it. Now here is where this gets explosive, because the Hormuz crisis did not just create a diplomatic moment for Canada, it created an energy moment that Carney has been positioning Canada for since day one of his government. The World Economic Forum confirmed this week that 34% of global crude oil trade passed through the Strait of Hormuz in 2025. Canada, by contrast, is a net oil exporter. Canada has the world's 3rd largest proven oil reserves, 168 billion barrels, behind only Venezuela and Saudi Arabia. Canada does not depend on the Strait of Hormuz for a single barrel. And since LNG Canada shipped its first Pacific cargo in the summer of 2025, Canadian liquefied natural gas is now reaching Asian markets directly, markets that previously depended entirely on Qatar and the Gulf, whose LNG facilities have been hit by this war. Carney said it plainly from Oslo. Canada is a reliable and low-risk energy exporter. He announced Canada would ramp up crude oil production by 140,000 barrels per day, beginning in April, a 2.6% increase on Canada's 2025 output, as part of the coordinated push to stabilize global markets. Think about what this actually means. The country that spent 30 years being told it needed American permission to export its own energy is now the country the world is calling. Japan signed a strategic partnership with Canada in March. India signed a uranium supply deal in February. Norway and the Nordic allies gathered in Oslo to stand with Canada. And now, in the middle of a global energy crisis, Canada is one of 7 nations that stepped up with a plan, while the United States president was publicly arguing with his own reflection. Paul Wells, one of Canada's most respected independent political analysts, has observed that Carney's entire diplomatic strategy since taking office has been built on a single principle: diversify now, before the crisis forces you to. The Hormuz blockade is the crisis. The diversification is already underway. Before we go further, take 2 seconds and hit subscribe and like. Every single click sends this video beyond Canada's borders, into American feeds, into allied newsrooms, into the rooms where decisions about Canada get made. Show Washington, show the world that Canadians are one nation, informed, united, and not going anywhere. Canada is here. Canada is forever. And with your support, that message reaches further than any government press release ever could. If you are watching our reel on Facebook, tap follow and join our community. Together, let's make Canada forever Canada's strongest voice. But here is the part this channel will not skip. Critics, and there are credible ones, point to a gap between Carney's energy rhetoric and Canada's actual pipeline capacity. Troy Media noted this week that Canada has oil and stability, but limited pipeline infrastructure to export it rapidly to global markets. The Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion only reached full capacity in late 2025. LNG Canada is shipping, but one terminal serving one Pacific route is not the same as being a global energy superpower. Canada's oil production increase of 140,000 barrels per day is real, but Canada still routes the overwhelming majority of its energy exports through the United States market. Here is the honest counter. Canada signed the joint Hormuz statement. Canada committed barrels to the IEA release. Canada is boosting production. But the pipelines that would make Canada a true alternative to Middle Eastern supply, the pipelines that would let Canadian oil reach tidewater in volume, are still years from completion. Carney's One Canadian Economy Act cut approval timelines from 5 years to 2. That means new infrastructure is possible faster than before. But faster than before is not the same as now. And the world needs oil now. This is the genuine tension at the heart of Canada's energy moment. The reserves are there, the political will is there, the allies are ready. But the physical infrastructure to deliver at global scale is still being built. The question is whether Canada's word is enough while the pipelines catch up. Here is where this week's events land in full. Trump demanded NATO follow him into the Hormuz crisis. Every major ally publicly refused. Trump called it a very foolish mistake, then reversed course and said the United States did not need help, while oil prices remained elevated and markets remained unconvinced. Meanwhile, Canada, without asking Washington's permission, without operating under NATO command, joined 6 sovereign allies in a statement grounded in international law, committed barrels to the global reserve release, pledged a production increase, and positioned itself as the reliable energy partner the world has been looking for since the Middle East started burning. Canada has the 3rd largest oil reserves on the planet. Canada's LNG is already on Pacific water. Canada's allies, from Tokyo to Oslo to New Delhi, signed deals with Ottawa before this crisis began. The Hormuz blockade did not catch Canada unprepared. It caught Canada positioned. Carney did not build this in a week. He built it in 12 months, through 26 foreign trips, through trade deals on 4 continents, through an Arctic defense plan that Russia and Washington both noticed, through a Davos speech that made the world stand up. The Hormuz crisis is not the test of that strategy. It is the proof of it. But here is the question Canada has not yet answered, and it is the one that will define the next decade. Canada's energy leverage is real. Canada's alliance network is real. But as long as 72% of Canada's exports still go to the United States, Canada's independence has a ceiling. Carney can sign every joint statement in the world. Until the pipelines reach tidewater in volume, until the export routes are genuinely diversified, Canada's sovereignty has a limit that no speech and no coalition can remove. Is Canada's current position strong enough to matter, not yet independent enough to be truly free, the best Canada can achieve in one term? Or is the infrastructure gap the one problem Carney has not yet solved, and the one problem that makes everything else fragile? Option A. Carney has already done what no Canadian Prime Minister has done in a generation. Built the alliances, signed the deals, positioned the energy sector, and moved independently of Washington when it counted. The infrastructure will follow. Sovereignty is being built in the right order. Option B. A country with the world's 3rd largest oil reserves that still routes 72% of its exports through one customer is not energy sovereign. Until the pipelines reach the Pacific and Atlantic in volume, Canada's leverage is potential, not power. The rhetoric is ahead of the reality. Drop your answer in the comments right now, option A or option B, and tell us in one sentence why. Your comment puts this conversation in front of more Canadians. This is not a poll.